Tonight, you will close your eyes and disappear, not into nothing, into somewhere else. A place that doesn't follow rules, where dead relatives speak and familiar streets turn into labyrinths, where your teeth fall out and you forget how to run, where something is always chasing you, but your legs refuse to move. You'll wake up and call it a dream. Then you'll forget it by noon. But here's the thing. That experience, that nightly vanishing act, has been happening to every human who has ever lived, every single one, for at least 300,000 years. And for most of that time, no one had any idea what it was. Your brain does something extraordinary every night. It generates an entirely convincing alternate reality, complete with light and sound and emotion and memory. It does this without your permission, without your awareness, and it does it so well that you believe it completely while it's happening. The question is, what did the people who came before you think was going on? Because they didn't have neuroscience, they didn't have sleep labs or EEG machines or REM cycle charts. They woke up disoriented and certain of something vivid, and they had to make sense of it. And their explanations, the ones carved into stone and scratched onto cave walls and whispered around ancient fires, changed the course of human civilization. Anthropologist David Lewis Williams spent decades studying the rock art of southern Africa's San people. What he found wasn't decoration, it was documentation. Spirals, zigzags, creatures half human and half animal, figures that seemed to dissolve into light and melt at the edges. These images, some dating back over 30,000 years, match almost exactly what people describe when they enter altered states of consciousness, including the vivid, surreal hallucinations of deep dreaming.
Lewis Williams argued that these ancient artists weren't just painting what they saw in waking life, they were painting what they saw when they closed their eyes. So the oldest art in the world might actually be a dream journal. Think about what that means. Your ancestors didn't dismiss their dreams. They couldn't afford to. In a world without medicine, without weather forecasts, without any reliable way to predict the future, a dream felt like information. It felt like contact. It felt like the world behind the world briefly making itself visible. And the brain, it turns out, was sending real signals. Sleep researcher Matthew Walker, author of Why We Sleep, describes dreaming, specifically REM sleep, as a form of overnight emotional therapy. During REM, your brain is highly active. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for rational, logical thinking, goes almost completely quiet. But your emotional centers, the amygdala, the hippocampus, light up like signal fires in the dark. You're not resting, you're processing. Every night, your brain replays emotional memories, strips away the sharp chemical edge of fear and grief, and files them somewhere safer. It runs simulations of social situations. It rehearses threats you might face. It makes connections between ideas that would never meet in waking life.
Ancient humans felt all of this happening, every night, with no framework to explain the mechanism. So they built one. In almost every culture that has ever existed, across every continent, on every side of every ocean, in climates and languages and belief systems that had no contact with one another, humans arrived at the same basic conclusion. When you dream, part of you goes somewhere else. The ancient Egyptians called it the Ba, a bird-shaped soul that left the body during sleep and traveled the land of the dead. They built entire temples to manage this nightly journey. They carved protective spells into coffin walls, not just for the afterlife, but for the dream state, a place they believed was equally real, equally dangerous, and equally navigable with the right preparation. The ancient Mesopotamians, the civilization that gave us the wheel and the written word, produced the first recorded dream dictionary around 2000 BCE. The text, known as the Assyrian Dream Book, cataloged hundreds of dream scenarios and their meanings. If you dreamed of flying, it meant good fortune was approaching. If you dreamed of your teeth falling out, it meant a relative would die. That last one, the teeth dream, still appears in surveys as one of the most common recurring dreams in the modern world, 4,000 years later. Same dream, same city, same language, same everything except the brain producing it. That is not coincidence. That is your brain running the same ancient program it has always run.
Psychologist Calvin Hall spent decades cataloging human dreams. In the 1950s and 1960s, he collected over 50,000 dream reports from people across different countries and cultures. What he found stopped him. The content of dreams was remarkably consistent across populations. People dreamed of being chased, of falling, of arriving somewhere completely unprepared, of people they loved behaving strangely, of teeth. Hall concluded that dreams are not random noise. They reflect universal human concerns, the fears and desires and anxieties that come with being this particular kind of animal, one that lives in groups, navigates social hierarchies, forms deep attachments, and knows it will one day die. Ancient humans had the same fears. They simply didn't know the fears were universal. Imagine waking up in a Paleolithic camp 60,000 years ago. The fire has burned low. The sky is still dark. You dreamed of a lion, not chasing you, just watching, standing perfectly still at the edge of the tree line, its eyes catching the last of the firelight. You don't know what it means, but you are certain with your whole body that it means something. Maybe you tell the person sleeping beside you. Maybe they say they dreamed of rain. A conversation begins. Patterns are noticed over weeks and seasons. The person in your group who seems to have particularly vivid or strangely accurate dreams begins to occupy a different role. This is almost certainly how shamanism began. Anthropologist Michael Winkelmann studied shamanic traditions across dozens of unrelated cultures, separated by oceans and centuries, and found a pattern that repeated almost without variation. The shaman is the person who moves most fluidly between ordinary waking consciousness and altered states. They enter trance deliberately, they dream with intention, they return with information the group needs. In hunter-gatherer societies, this was not mysticism for its own sake, it was practical. The shaman was the one who could access a realm where the causes of illness lived, where the location of prey animals might be revealed, where the dead could sometimes still be consulted. Dreams were the bridge, and your brain tonight will build that same bridge. When you enter REM sleep, something strange happens to your body. Your muscles become temporarily paralyzed. Not completely, you still breathe, your eyes move rapidly, your heart beats, but you cannot act on what you're experiencing. Your brain has essentially disconnected your motor system from the dream world that is generating. This is a feature, not a flaw. Without this paralysis, you would act out your dreams in real time. You would run from the lion, you would leap off the cliff, you would reach for the people who appear and find only air. Some people experience a condition where this paralysis partially fails. They shout, thrash, fall out of bed, sometimes injure themselves or the person beside them. It is called REM sleep behavior disorder. For ancient humans, watching someone do this in firelit darkness, convulsing and screaming while apparently asleep, it must have looked exactly like possession, like something entering the body while the person's soul was elsewhere. And so possession entered the mythological record of nearly every civilization on Earth. The line between the dream world and the spirit world was, for most of human history, no line at all.
This is why ancient Greeks slept in temples, not metaphorically, literally. The practice was called incubation. You would travel to the sanctuary of a healing god, usually Asclepius, god of medicine, purify yourself through fasting and ritual bathing, make an offering, and then sleep on a sacred stone floor and wait. You were waiting for the god to appear in your dream and prescribe a cure. Thousands of stone inscriptions survive describing these divine medical consultations. Pilgrims reported that Asclepius appeared to them in the night, examined them, and gave specific instructions. Some described complete and inexplicable recoveries by morning. Your brain, of course, was doing something real. The ritual, the fasting, the expectation, the altered state that comes from removing yourself from ordinary life, all of it influenced dream content in measurable ways. You dreamed what you needed to dream. The cure was sometimes suggestion, sometimes simple rest after a long journey, sometimes just the experience of being heard and taken seriously for the first time. Even in its most ancient and mystical form, the dream was doing biological work. So what did ancient humans actually dream about? The honest answer is almost certainly the same things you dream about. Their brains were structurally identical to yours. The architecture, the circuitry, the nightly programs running in the dark, unchanged for 300,000 years. They dreamed of the people they loved and feared. They dreamed of the animals that hunted them in the landscapes they crossed. They dreamed of falling, of flying, of arriving somewhere important and forgetting entirely why they came. They just didn't wake up and reach for a phone to search what it meant. They reached for each other. They built stories around what they'd seen. They painted the images onto stone so the visions would not vanish with the morning light.
Every major religion that has ever existed has dreaming somewhere near its origin story. The dream of Jacob, the visions of Muhammad in the cave at Hira, the Buddha's mother dreaming of a white elephant the night of his conception. The prophetic dream is woven so deeply into the history of human belief that it is nearly impossible to imagine how religion would have developed without it. What if the entire architecture of human spiritual life, the gods, the afterlife, the idea that there is something beyond what your waking eyes can see, was built, at least in part, on the experience of waking from a vivid dream and knowing with complete certainty that you had just been somewhere real? Not metaphorically real, not symbolically real, neurologically, emotionally, undeniably real, because to your brain, it was. Neuroscientist Rodolfo Linus at New York University proposed something that sounds strange until you sit with it. The brain is not primarily a reactive organ. It does not simply respond to the world outside. Instead, it generates an internal model of reality, a continuous simulation, and then checks that simulation against incoming sensory information. Waking life is that simulation running without the update. When you dream, you are experiencing exactly what your brain generates in the complete absence of the external world. And what it generates is not chaos. It is coherent. It is emotional. It is populated by people and places and events that feel more real than anything you can describe afterward.
This is the same simulation system that looked at empty land and imagined a city, that heard silence and imagined music, that looked at a stranger and decided, for reasons it couldn't articulate, that they could be trusted. Your dream is not a malfunction. It is the machine finally running free. Tonight, you will close your eyes again. You will go somewhere your ancient ancestors also went, 60,000 years ago, in a painted cave, on a wide Paleolithic plain, under a sky full of stars they didn't yet have names for. You will dream of something vivid and urgent and emotionally overwhelming. You will wake up certain it meant something, and by noon tomorrow, it will be gone, just like it was for them, just like it has always been.